Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
And today we're talking about the ideal group size. So the ideal group of players for your game, what is it? And how do you determine what that is? So I think for the most part, there is no answer except the group size that you have the most fun with. But, that doesn't really help in this conversation. So what really is the ideal group size? I think a lot depends on the GM, the group itself, and the game you're playing. For example, I would think something like Dungeons and Dragons, or not Dungeons and Dragons, but I would think something where there's a lot of technical combat. A larger group gives you more
Options?
Exactly, more options and gives you more ways to tackle a situation. The more players and more characters, you have more skills, more hit points to bring to bear on a creature, more attacks and all that. And so I think somebody called it the action economy, right? So, for example, if you're battling one monster and you have 5 people attacking it, there's 5 attacks to every monster, 1 attack. And, and that could change depending on the levels and all that other stuff. So that still is what's going on. So in a combat heavy game, for example, Dungeons and Dragons, you have this idea of the ideal, not the ideal group size, but the balanced party. You should have, I don't even know what a balanced party is, but you should have this, you should have that. What is it like? You should have like a frontline fighter. You should have a ranged fighter and a cleric, or somebody who heals you. And of course, you need a sorcerer who throws, or a spell thrower that throws magical combat spells. And all kinds of other things could play into the balanced party. And so, and why is this idea? Why is there an idea of a balanced party? The idea is because I think you have these pre-written modules that have certain things written into them, and you need this type of skill to get past it. To find a secret door, you need a thief in the old days, or a rogue in the newer era. Without a rogue, you can't get past this door, or you can make it'll be exceedingly difficult to try to find a door. Or as a GM, you just say, you find a secret door, by chance, to be able to continue the game. So I think that's why D&D, especially, or any game like that, you need this balanced party, and that means you need a bigger party, because it's hard to have a balanced party of 2.
The first time I ran into this was when we were playing, I think it was Pathfinder. What are they? What's the Pathfinder Society?
Yeah.
When Augustine was small, when we went to a gaming store and we sat down, and they said, well, this is what we have in the party, and here are the character sheets that you can choose from. They were pre-made characters.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And then they decide, because that was the first time I ever thought about that, you could only have one thing of each kind so that the bout party was balanced.
Oh, you could have like 2 sorcerers.
Yeah. Which is very odd to me, because Saul's never done that. He just lets you make your whatever character you want, and then you figure it out. If you don't have a rogue, you don't have a rogue. You have a barbarian who's going to use an axe to take the door down. Right? That kind of thing.
Forget sneaking.
Yeah.
We're not a sneaking type of party.
So balanced seems kind of odd, but to me. But I know that I've read a whole lot of stuff about it, and I understand where people are coming from. But that kind of makes your ideal party size. You have to have certain people to play certain roles.
Right.
And that would make it hard if you only have 3 people in your group, or you only have 2 people in your group. And I heard some of the way that people fix this is they have people play 2 characters, or they rent a mage for the adventure or something like that, right?
Rent a mage. Well,
that kind of thing. You have your soldiers are traveling with you.
Hirelings.
Yes.
So that's funny that you mentioned Pathfinder Society, because I specifically in my notes, even though we were working this on our own, I put down another thing is Pathfinder Society and Adventures Club for D&D. Adventures League. They want tables of 6 and 8, right? Because the modules are built for the balanced party, right? For everybody to be able to do something. And what happens if there's none of that there? I think we played with this idea of that we were all going to play. Was it gnomes? And we're all
rogues, right?
Rogues and gnomes.
Was it rogues?
I don't know. We're all going to be one class and one race.
The GM didn't go for it. It was.
He goes, I don't think it'd be such a good idea, but we almost had it. We had a bunch of short people. Of course, getting 8 people to agree on one thing was a bit difficult. So, some people broke ranks, players, but for the most part, that we had like 2 dwarves, a gnome, a halfling, and something else, and then somebody. I think you were the only person that was playing a normal person, which was a sorceress, right?
Of course.
Yes. I think that.
But that threw off the GM because we were not balanced.
We still weren't balanced, right? Because we were doubling up on certain
aspects.
Yeah.
Or peoples.
Yeah, it was funny, but what I was gonna say is that. So they encourage this idea of a balanced party. They encourage this idea of a larger group of 6 to 8 players because, the larger the party, the more resources you have to bear on whatever problem is going to come up. And sometimes, like you said, they when you're gearing up to play at a organized play event, sometimes you don't know anybody, and sometimes you might know 1 or 2, but you're like, okay, what kind of character? And that discussion does happen. Okay, you're gonna play your character. You're gonna play your ranged rogue. Okay, I'm gonna play this. Okay, what do you? And then there's that discussion in front of and it just bugs the hell out of me.
But that has to do a lot with organized play, right?
Right.
These are people a lot of these people who do organized play are people who can't or are in a new area, or they're not playing with the same group they've been playing with for 30 years like you. Right. They don't know people. They're new to the game, or, they are tired of their group and they want to go find something different. So, and the organized part of the play leads to the group size, right? Because Adventures League has built their modules to be able to play anywhere at this from level 1 to level whatever for each season as they go, so that you can start a character and go through the whole thing. And you can, but that's the way that it's made, right? That's it's particularly, all the adventures are the same in the room that you're playing, right? Maybe they're first or second level, but they're all a module. Everybody's playing, the first level character for this season, right?
Yeah.
I only know that because I read it on Facebook. So it lends to having that kind of balanced party, that idea that you have to have a certain number of people in your party and they have to all be different things.
Correct. Yes. So I think this is what causes D&D to be thought as a game that needs a large group of people, because that's this play style, right? That's just the way it's built. It's built to have, a fighter, a magic user, a cleric at the very least, and you throw in a rogue and maybe somebody who could do combat from far away, like a range combat, like a ranger or whatever. And I think organized play, no matter what game you play, really brings that to the forefront, right? It really brings that idea of this balanced party, that you don't want to double up on certain types of characters because that isn't really useful, and blah 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 blah. And you're right. I think for the most part, a lot of organized play attracts a lot of people who are new to an area or are trying out the role playing for the first time. But I know people who love organized play. I know people who, when we first started playing Pathfinder organized play before 5th edition had even come out with Augustine, I met some people that I still see playing organized play to this day. Well, when we were still before COVID, and I still remember a couple of the people's names because I played with them, and they just stuck out in my head, and they're still playing organized play. When we went to the last convention, well, not the last one, but we went somewhere. I think it was KublaCon or even Pacificon. I saw the same people playing, and Augustine was what 11 when he was playing organized play. So over 5 years, and they're still playing organized play. So it retained certain people who just like that style of play. They like that. A lot of that is, I guess it's.
Well, they put out new things every year, and they make new campaigns, and so it gives you the sense of completion, right?
Yeah.
And it also, that you can go to anywhere that has an organized play event going on,
right, and
you are part of it. So you know what's going on, right?
And a lot of people, who are organized play in a certain area, they begin to know everybody else, and they like
right,
getting together with those people. They're
right, that's how you make friends and have
and they
fun.
just like playing that style. So D&D, certain games and certain genre games will not demand, but would like or would prefer the preferred method of people, and the preferred amount of people to play is between over 5, right? Like D&D.
Or you could just have 4 for D&D and then just figure out what to do when you come into contact with something that, if you don't have a healer, then you need to make sure you have a bunch of healing potions with you. Things like that.
Well, in the old days, you used to have hirelings, and in D&D online.
Yes, there are hirelings.
There are hirelings. You can hire a cleric or magician.
Augustine and Alan are always complaining. I hear them all the time about that their cleric won't heal themselves. They'll die.
That's hilarious. So it's like they hired this cleric to heal them when they obviously want to get hurt, and man, why is my cleric healing me? And it's funny to see. Yes, they're still playing D&D online. I don't know. They go through phases like that. I don't know. I hadn't seen them play D&D online for 2 years probably.
And they're on it now. Let me tell you,
they're on it all the time. Even got me to play out a little bit. So that's one thing. Like the type of game is gonna make you, or not make you, but is gonna push for a certain number of players. For example, a spy game, you don't need a group of 8 players at your table.
Because if you have 8 spies working together, you're in big trouble.
Spy does have their support people, right?
Yeah.
What's his name? This famous spy,
James Bond.
But he's kind of a loner, right? Because he usually doesn't have a partner, where in other spy games, in other spy movies and shows, that there's a partner for what is it,
Remington Steele.
Yeah, that's right. There was she was the real smart one, and he was just the face, right? And then there was the old one where he's a tennis star. What's it called?
I don't remember.
The one with Robert Culp.
You're going way back beyond my years of knowledge.
So there's that group of 2. I think the only other group is Mission Impossible. They were a group of people who were spies, right? And they each had their own, talents. But that number was still pretty low. I think they had
3 or 4,
5 people at the most.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the characters from the TV show and the movies. I think that's 4 or 5. So I think games like that would not require, but bring the number of
the perfect party members.
Yes, the perfect number of people playing, and I think that's just part of the genre, of the spy game. Other games, maybe horror games. I don't know. It seems to me like horror games, it work better in smaller groups.
I guess it just depends too, and that brings you to the fact of what is your group comfortable with, and what is the GM comfortable with running. Right? How many people is the GM comfortable running? Because that kind of determines how much fun you're going to have, right?
Yes. So of all the criteria, I think the GM's ability to handle the number of players is probably the number one consideration you should have on the size of your party or the size of the groups that you're playing with. And in the old days when I was playing D&D, it was 8 people. Yeah, let's all get together and play games. I mean, we used to have these large parties and large groups of people playing. I'm trying to think of the who used to play. Well, there was always me, Sip, Felipe, Ward, Mark, Don, Mike.
Stop naming their last names, dude.
I'm sorry, Mike, Tom. I mean, so that's 8 players right there, and we probably were a group of about 10 players or 10 people and one person GMing. Now, at one point, Tom, Rick, and Mike, they decided to be co-GMs, and they ran their famous staff campaign. And
famous to you people, not to the entire world.
Well, infamous, because to us, you're right. Everybody. It was basically like there was a campaign for AD&D called the Staff of Seven Parts or something like that. The Staff of Seven Parts, and basically they had thought of this like I think even before that came out. So it was this big grand campaign that they wanted to run, and it was pretty cool. The little that I remember of it, because I think I wasn't always there. Anyway, those were large groups of players. I mean, we were like playing with 10 people. I remember when we were playing at Steinbeck, Felipe literally could not turn away people, so he accepted kids. Kids for at the time were anybody younger than me, and he had tables of 10 kids, 8 kids all the time, and me and Mike. I think the ideal group size has definitely gone down from the old days. Because in the old days, there was no ideal group. It's, hey, everybody can play. And I think people have become more.
They only want they only want 3 other players. Right. Or they only want to run for 3 people. Or they only want to run for 5 people.
Well, they're more aware of what is it?
Group dynamics.
Group dynamics is one thing, and also GM resources, right? Their mental capability of being able to keep track of everything that's going on. Now, keeping track of what 8 players are doing is different than keeping track of what 4 players is doing. And just your mental load is much less. Your CPU, your brain, is running much cooler than when you have 8 players telling you what they're doing. And then you got to remember what they're doing. Then you got to deal with, so it's just a lot of bandwidth. I'm not using computer terms and stuff, but that's it is. It's people have it's difficult to keep track of all these things that are going on. And the less you have to keep track of, the easier it is for the GM. Just like a player, like the difference between a player and a GM. As a player, all I got to worry about is my own character.
Right.
I'm like, wow.
As a GM, you have to worry about a lot more things than that.
Right. And then if you compound it with more each and every player. So I think people have become cognizant of that.
What I've learned from running for large groups, because mostly that's all I run for, because there's a bunch of you. I think there's 7 of you, maybe 8. Is the most important thing is to make sure that you, like if you're in combat with that many players, you need to make sure everybody knows that their turn is coming up and that they need to do something on their turn, or they're going to get passed over and they'll have to come back to them, because you don't want to stop the momentum of the gameplay.
Right.
You want everybody to feel like they're special, they get to do something, and like Saul says, you shine that spotlight on different people at different times,
right,
and give them their chance to have their moment where they can kill a monster with 96 points of damage or something like that.
Right. Spotlight didn't exist back in the old days.
No.
Either you're the loudest player hogging up all the spotlight or all the attention, back then it was called, or if you didn't care, you would just sit back and go along for the ride. So a lot of things have changed too about GMing, right? There's the idea of a spotlight. There's the idea of every player should have a time in the game or in the adventure or in the session to really put on their character skills or what they're good at, and stuff like that. That stuff did not exist for me 20, 30 years ago when we were playing, 40 years ago. So things have changed too as far as the idea of GMing and what it means to be a GM. So because of that, I think people are more aware that GMing is a very difficult thing. And GMs themselves are aware, man, this is a lot of work. I want to make sure that everybody, and I think everybody's having fun, but I think because of the times that we're in, we don't want people who are bored at our games. We don't know. I mean, unless they were like literally, throwing spitballs at you because they were bored, you didn't care if they were bored. The GM would present stuff, and if you were bored, well, okay, maybe next time you'll have fun. Most GMs, I mean, we're talking a long time ago, they didn't care. I mean, they really were like, this is what I'm putting on. If you don't like it, well, too bad. It's on you. Everybody else most of the people are having fun. That's all I care
Get with
about.
the program or move on.
I think more and more people these days are more concerned about everybody having fun. Everybody having
or at least
a say so in the
attempting
game.
to make sure that everybody is enjoying themselves, trying to give them the chance to shine in the spotlight.
Right.
Because there's all kinds of different things when you're in a party of 5 or 6 people. It's going to be harder to make sure of that. You can only give them the opportunity, and you're not responsible for everybody. For each person being happy or enjoying themselves, they're responsible for bringing themselves to the game and doing that. So when you're talking about party size, those are the things that you take into consideration as a GM, right?
Right.
How many people can I handle?
Yes.
As in, like, when I don't mind running for a large group, but I also make sure that they're in charge of their own combat stuff, right? I don't want to know that I don't want you to telling me 2 turns later that you did it wrong, or I gave you the wrong number of hit point damage that I did, or I did this wrong, or if you're going to do that, that's fine, but I'm not going to be responsible for going back and changing anything.
Or just, be like, for example, players who don't know how to play and they don't know what die to roll, right? And stuff like that. What do I roll for damage? Well, okay, as a GM with a large group, you cannot continue to be telling that player, oh, this is 2d8, this is 1d, what weapon, that, like I said, that stuff cannot happen because you don't have enough time to spend with that one player.
Yes, but then you also have other players that will pick up the slack for you on that kind of thing. That's what I'm saying. Because like I don't always know. I mean, I know when I'm a player, yes. I know what I'm going to do on my turn and what my spells do or what I can do. Except, like, if you're playing in a game that you're not familiar with, like Traveler,
right?
I have no idea how the combat works, and I'm just looking at it going, well, I can only use this blade if my strength is so high, and there's different kinds of criteria, right? So different kinds of things. But I have people that are there telling me, okay, you're fine. Just roll the 2 dice and I'll tell you what happens.
Well, even me, I forgot exactly how combat worked. I know there was that table, which is actually really useful.
Saul laughs at me because I said that Traveler was crunchy because I'm looking at all these tables and all these charts going, what the hell am I doing?
Well,
I'm like going, I'm reading the instructions. I'm reading the and it was more like an instruction book than like the 5th edition D&D book because it was written a long time ago. And I'm looking at it going, what does he mean? And Augustine and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what it meant. And so Augustine just took it literally and goes, this is the way we're going to do it.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think
which works.
Which probably the best way to do it. I think it's funny that you call it crunchy. I mean, I never thought of it as crunchy, but
he says it's only 2d6. Well, fine, but you have to know what your 2d6 roll means.
Well, that's what's weird is that I totally forgot how, what bonuses you get for having a high, for example, I don't know and I forgot what dictates what. For example, dexterity or strength. Does dexterity or strength help your range combat or your physical combat skill? I mean, like D&D, if you have an 18, it's +4 to whatever you hit with a sword, right? In Traveler, I don't remember if you got any bonuses for having a high stat. There's that table that tells you, well, unfortunately, no, there's no table in Traveler that gives you like all the plus and minuses depending on the range and depending on the type of armor and what your I guess it's built into that table. So I'm gonna totally side discussion because we're talking about Traveler. So in classic Traveler, they would give you pluses and minuses to add to your die roll to get over above 8. That's what you need to roll on 2 6-sided dice to succeed or to hit or whatever. So in the original Traveler book, it would have like the different types of armor, and it would give you pluses or minuses depending on what kind of weapon, and then it had a range, and it would give you pluses and minuses depending on what kind of range, and then it was a plus or minus depending on what your relevant characteristic was. Like if it was a strength and you didn't have the proper strength to lift a 2-handed sword, it would give you like a big minus. So there's all that. So
I say crunchy.
So I guess it was a little crunchy, but then there's a little box game called Snapshot Also came in a little box that's about the size of the same size that the Traveler little black books came in, and it was called Snapshot, and it was by the same company, and it was person to person ship combat game. And in that game, so there's a clue, very helpful clue if you ever played. They might have fixed it in second edition, Mongoose, whatever it is. So in that game, if you're playing Classic Traveler, there is a little, you can probably find it online. There's a table called the Snapshot combat table, and in it does all the math for you, and it puts it on one big table. It's a little fold out sheet, and it basically has all those numbers figured out. So it just gives you the plus. So you just look up the range, you look up the armor, boom, this is what the plus or minus is.
He says it like that's easy, because I saw this chart table thing, and Philip put it out on so we could all see it, and I'm still looking at it going, I don't know. I'm just gonna roll the dice. You all tell me if I did anything. And so Philip just goes, well, do you have, what's this and what's this? And so I tell him, and then he goes, okay, this is what it is. You need to get this. And I'm like going, okay, it's very crunchy to me, because I have no clue as to the dynamics of the combat, because it was the first time I'd ever played Traveler. So when you say that you're not going to wait for a player, or you shouldn't have to wait for a player to know all the rules of the fighting, it totally depends on what game you're playing and stuff like that.
Right.
And
I'm talking about a game you've been playing for a while.
I understand.
Yes.
I understand.
So you're right. In this case, Traveler, we're all relearning. So like I hadn't played. Literally, I'm trying to think of the last time I played Traveler. It's probably been over 30 years. So I don't think I played Traveler since before I was 22.
I believe
after
you.
22.
I believe you.
Because I was playing Traveler up until the time I left for college, which I didn't leave for college until I was 21. It took me 3 years of community college to get out of there. But so it was really literally. And then back then, I don't know how I learned how to play Traveler. People just told me how to play, and I took their word at it. I never read the book. I mean, I bought the book. I had the books. I rebought them, and I sold them. I wish I never should have sold them. And because I had the original first.
Anyway.
But I never really actually read the rules on how to play, because back then people would just tell you how to play. That's how we learned how to play a lot of games. We didn't actually have to learn how to play it our own way, and so by ourselves, right? Like today's board games, when we open the rule book and we're like, oh, okay, this, and so
then you go to YouTube and find someone who will tell you what you're supposed to do. So
back then, a lot of it was just somebody figured out how to play, and if you played with that person, they would show you how they played, and depending on how smart that person was and how carefully they read the rules, you were either playing really close to what the intended way of playing or not. And so we never really thought about it. We started with the original D&D rules, and I remember reading those rules, and I didn't remember thinking it was all that difficult to understand, but it was really basic. And so a lot of it was just, okay, I read how to make a character, boom, I made a character, let's play the game. And then the rest of it was Felipe, my older brother, who got me hooked on D&D, showed us how to play. And every game that we, like Traveler, the only game that I think I really needed to read the rules to learn to play was Gamma World and Space Opera. And Space Opera was a terrible written book for rules, but we figured it out. And people say, I still see it on online on Facebook groups, that's a terrible game, it's unplayable. Well, dude, I go, it's not unplayable, because I played it. I ran 2 10-year campaigns, and I ran it at a con, and with people who have never played it. Of course,
I had a very crunchy system.
I had a homebrew a little bit for playing at a convention, but for the most part, we were using all the rules to play that game. I just streamlined it a bit. So party size. We totally got off party size.
Saul went way off on that one. Sorry.
So I remember con games, right? When I run a con game, I remember running con games for 8 players. And then if somebody wanted to come in, I'd run for 9 players. And I didn't think anything of it, as this is 20 years ago.
And?
Maybe 25 years ago. So, but as now I probably wouldn't run for 8 players. In fact, when I run at cons, my maximum player limit is 6, simply because it's easier for me, and there's the idea is that as you have more players, there's more chance that players are not going to be left out. They're not going to have time, to shine, no spotlight time and stuff like that, and it's harder for you as a GM to pay attention to those games. So even me within my own world of how I look at running games, my player count has gone lower when I run games at conventions. Now, when I run home games, I could sometimes, not that I could care less if people are bored, but I think
everybody in your home games, though, is very mouthy and tells you exactly what they think. And a lot of them you've been playing with since you were 11 or 12. So it's not like it's not quite the same as playing with people you don't know.
I agree. It's weird how that dynamic is. It is weird how that dynamic is, and how I can run a game with 8 players, people I know for a long time, and I don't know. I don't know if any of them feel left out or feel like they're not.
If they do feel left out, they will tell you. In depth.
Well, they haven't told me, so.
And detail.
Well, they haven't told me, so I guess that's a good thing. So I think your ideal group size is dependent on 3 things: the GM, the game, and the genre, right? So all those 3. The GM is probably the most important, since that's the person who's running the game, and how comfortable they are at the group size. Because if they look at an 8-player group and like, oh my god, how am I going to run this game? One, the GM is in trouble because they're lacking, the confidence to run that game, and the players are in trouble because when a GM is not thinking that they're going to be able to do their best, they probably won't be able to do their best because they lack the confidence. So it's whatever the GM is comfortable with. Now, if the GM is comfortable with 4 players, I mean, I know that there's some GMs out there, they go, oh yeah, I won't run for anything more than 4 players.
Well, and that's understandable. If they're not comfortable running for a large group, then they shouldn't do it, because they know what they have planned out. They know what the adventures looks like for them. So if you add in an extra player or 2, then that might throw them totally off.
Right. Exactly.
Especially if you have everything set up for what the encounters are supposed to be and what you think is going to happen, which will never actually happen the way that you think it's going to happen. But you need to know what you can handle.
Right. So like I said, when I run a game at a con, it's 6. I remember running my Tecmo game, Bethorn, and I had made 6 characters, and that's all. And basically, I needed 6 players. I couldn't run it, running with one. There was one character that could be kind of like I could leave out, but I would have liked to run with 6 players, because all the characters were interconnected and had, there was a lot of intrigue going on, and so eliminating one character would have been tough. 2 would have been almost ridiculously tough, and so I was really lucky that every time I ran that game, I got 6 players. And so that was, I think, to me, that's about the nice limit. For me, I like to have as many players as I can, because I want to entertain as many players as I can. And for me, 6 is a good number. Other people, it's 4. And I don't mind running for 8 people I really know well. And
I think that has a lot to do with it. If you know the people well, you've been playing with them for a long time, it's easier to have a larger group, right?
Yes.
Because you can tell if Steve is bored, which never happens, by the way, or if, Augustine is off doing something else, you realize that you need to bring him back in, right? Whereas if you don't know the people, you can't tell their ticks, or you don't know what their tells are, right?
Yes.
So that has a lot to do with the number of players that you can run for comfortably.
What do you think is your ideal group size?
I don't know, because I've never really had I just, there's the people that want to play, and they're the people that make the characters, right? And then you run for them.
Right.
Because I've been around you too long, and you're a group of friends.
And you don't want to,
I'm not going to tell someone, no, you can't play.
Oh no, that you're the 7th person.
Sorry, I can only run for 6.
Yes, that is my problem too. Is that I can. It's hard for me to say no. But I think most people realize that when you're running for a big group, at least your friends, they know that sometimes they might not see the spotlight, and that's okay.
But they also know if you're running for people that you've played with for years and years, they're having fun listening to their friends do silly things, right? Or arguing on the side with each other. And now that we're on Roll20 and in the chat, what's going on? Or, throwing things out there to change things up when they want to.
Right, mix it up and stuff. So I think those are the criteria for your ideal group size. I would say if you're a new GM, smaller is better.
Yes.
More intimate is better. So there is no ideal group size. It all depends on the game, GM, and the genre. So
there you go.
So there you go.
This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
Have a good day.